So now we come to the very last session of today, and we have a real treat planned for you. We have 3 founders here today, both physically and dialing in digitally. And in this session, we'll dive into the tough choices that they've had to make this year and how they've adapted and learned some valuable lessons along the way.
First up, I'd like to introduce Ankiti, who as a child wanted to be a musician. And if you're lucky, you might be able to catch Ankiti singing in some of the venues in Singapore. So Ankiti is the co-founder and CEO of Zilingo, and a business that's known for simplifying the supply chain in finance. Thank you for joining us.
Next up is Lizzie, who you should hopefully see coming onto your screens now. Lizzie, as a child, wanted to be a forensic scientist, having watched too much CSI. In her spare time, she's the co-founder and CEO of ZestMoney, one of India's largest consumer lending businesses. So thank you for joining us, Lizzie.
And last but not least is Louis, who's joining us in the studio. So thank you for making it over here to see us. Another musician who wanted to be a violinist when he was growing up. And so maybe you could form a band with Ankiti. I can play some beats and we can set something up for the end of the year at the festival. So Louis is the founder and CEO of FOMO Pay, a full payment solution provider who's recently been acquired by AMTD Group. Congrats, and we'll certainly be digging into that acquisition a little bit later on in this session. Thanks for joining us, Louis.
Thanks. It's great to be here, and share the journey with everyone.
Thanks. So I can see in the chat functionality, I've been keeping an eye on it, that we're joined by a number of entrepreneurs around the world. So I'd like to start with some of the advice that you might have for entrepreneurs coming into this period. So I'll start with you, Ankiti. Reflecting on the year to date, what do you think the biggest lesson that you've learned has been?
I think the biggest lesson that I've learned so far is that there are no rules, and we are all living in a reality where the biggest strength that we can have is agility, and really being able to adapt to anything that the year and the economy and this pandemic is throwing at us. So there is absolutely no room to feel like we know anything or we have any answers, and just be ready to sort of dive in and solve problems as they come, like day zero.
Yeah, certainly agility is a key word of this year. And Lizzie, I want to kind of delve into some of the decision making for you this year, and what's been the best decision you've made this year, and why?
So I think this year has been all about making decisions in the absence of perfect information. I think one of the things is, how do you make quick decisions when you're relying on data that has massive gaps still in it, right?
I think we caught most of that, a few technical, but I think Lizzie was talking there about the gaps in data, where you're still having to make decisions quickly as a founder and adapt to the current situation. So thank you, Lizzie. Hopefully we can get that connection situation fixed. Louis, it's been an eventful last month for you, not just for you. I think, Pat, you mentioned in the session earlier about the Singapore investment figures that we've seen so far this year, that we've had a record-breaking high, both in terms of equity investing as well as M&A activity. I'd love to hear your story of acquisition this year, and potentially some advice that you would share for some founders out there that might be looking for a similar route.
Right. So as you may see from the news, so FOMO Pay was acquired by AMTD Digital earlier this month. So it's interesting it will be one of the milestone for FOMO. Actually, it has been our 5th year in the mobile payment industry, and now we get involved into a bigger platform, into a bigger ecosystem under AMTD. Actually, they call it AMTD SpiderNet, which is an ecosystem to provide one-stop integrated financial digital solutions to the corporate and clients, the merchants. Right, so we have great synergies with each other. We met in Singapore FinTech Festival last year. That's how we get to know each other. And then we've we further our conversations earlier this year in Davos, in World Economic Forum, where we see a great synergy to join AMTD group. And that's how it went in the past few months. And yeah, we are very excited to onboard into AMTD group and now getting into a bigger platform to provide our service to a wider scale of the customers and corporates in the region. So basically, our advice to the founders, especially in the fintech industry, what we see this year, 2020 is really a very challenging year, but there are still great opportunities in terms of digitization has been accelerated. Adoptions of the new technology by the big companies and financial institutions have been accelerated as well. Okay, but the problem we've seen is it used to be an unbundled service for all the most of the individual startups in the fintech industry to provide the service to the customers. But now the time has changed, and we see more and more clients and the customers, they're looking for integrated solutions. Whereas if a particular one company may not be able to provide, that's why it's a time for consolidation. So that's also the main reasons we take these acquisition opportunities and to join a bigger platform and ecosystem to further provide a full value chain financial service to our customers, right?
So it's all about providing greater value to your customers across the region. So,
right.
Okay, so we're gonna switch gears slightly and have an audience poll. So we're really keen to get the audience views on a particular question. And the question we have is, what aspect of running a business has taken the most mind share during the pandemic? So we've put down 5 responses. So for those of you in the audience, please start voting. And while we wait for you to vote, I'm going to pick up on one of the responses, in particular around managing teams. And Lizzie, I hope you can hear me, because I know there's been some slight technical challenges, but it seems like you're on the line now. So I want to ask you, Lizzie, how do you keep your teams motivated during these tough times that you've experienced this year?
Yes, sorry about the technical difficulties. And I think what we've noticed, communication is everything. So just constantly over communicating. We do now a weekly or fortnightly town hall, which used to be quarterly. And we do a lot more sort of video content and just general content to our teams to help them understand the business, the economy, and our outlook. But I think the hardest bit is asking people to trust you at a time when you yourself have so much uncertainty about the future.
Louis, another poll response here is customer acquisition. So I think that's particularly difficult with international business when you can't travel to meet potential customers. Over the last 6 months, and obviously going into an acquisition process, you would have had to meet virtually, I guess, multiple times with Calvin from AMTD. But can you talk me through the challenges that you would have had around international business or customer acquisition?
Right. Actually, for FOMO Pay, which when we start as a fintech company, from day one, we focus on digitizing every step of the business to try to streamline the entire operational process. But we didn't expect in one day, we really can do this 100% online, full digital, which is all our initial expectation as well. So now we are able to onboard the customers in those countries where we are allowed to provide the service fully digital, fully online for them to provide everything to, for the merchant onboardings, to the settlement, to all the cross-border settlement, everything's in one dashboard, one platforms. But in terms of the conversation or communications during this pandemic period, especially for our acquisition, most of the meetings and negotiations were online through the virtual meetings. But we just feel like, it makes you to be more focused and to be more efficient when you have the chance to really stay and work at home, right, without any kind of disturbance by other people. Every day you just focus on your only one stuff. So it really something new, and we cannot expect before this kind of COVID happens. And now we are also taking some new initiatives in the company. We want to extend the time for people to stay and work at home. We are still getting all our teams to not to come back office, right? We are looking at the situations. We hope that this can get better, but we are trying to keep everyone to work from home and then to continue this kind of working style until end of the year. Yeah, and it really changed how our organizations work after this COVID. Yeah.
And are you still seeing the same level of productivity? So in the first few months, it would have been, or potentially could have been high. And are you seeing that level off, or what are you seeing in, say, the last few weeks of the work from home culture?
In the first month, I would say it's really challenging, and I'm quite anxious I'm quite concerned about the productivity. But for us, we start to implement kind of office automation, this kind of app, which is provided by very established internet companies. Basically, you are able to, it's like social media apps, but only for company itself. Only your staff are able to use and share. It's on mobile, it's on laptop, actually it's 7/24 connected. You're even able to see whether people have seen your message or not, which cannot be achieved by the traditional email or the social media apps. After 1 month, we realized actually the productivity can stay at around 70 to 80%. But in the next few months, we are continuously implement some new technologies, which we quickly source and get the government support. Then we realize now the productivity can get back to around 90% of everybody working in the office. Yeah.
Okay. So now we're going to show the results from the question. So what if we can bring that up on the screen? Okay. So it's kind of as expected. So managing expenses and cash flows and business continuity planning were pretty much the front runners here. So you had 30% and a 28%. And so, Ankiti, I want to ask you the question around how do these results compare to, the biggest mind share that you've experienced over the last kind of 3 or 4 months?
I think, frankly, there has been so much going on, and I think it's just about sort of managing your own expectations in the face of really not knowing what is going to happen. I'll give you a little bit of context of what happened as we went into the crisis and sort of what kind of ups and downs we've seen in the last 3-4 months. When we went in, we didn't know, for example, how the economies would trend, how retail would shape up, how commerce would shape up. Our suppliers didn't know what they should be making, right? What product mix should they have? So therefore, how would they finance the right product mix and all of that? And I think the businesses that were able to be most agile and had to make a lot of tough decisions, very, very tough decisions, especially around people, have somewhat managed to survive the last 3 months. So I think it's just a question of how long is this going to be this unpredictable, and how do we prepare ourselves to be as best suited as possible for what we don't know is coming.
I think it's a good word to use there. I want to change gears a bit and talk about the advice that you've each received over the last 6 months. So I think at the beginning of the pandemic, I was seeing a lot of reports and blog posts from VCs like Sequoia or Lightspeed Capital that were kind of advocating these messages to their founders about how they should respond and how they should prepare. Ankiti, you have investment from Sequoia, also from Temasek. Can you share a bit about the best advice that you've received from investors over this period?
I think it was already in the month of Feb when Sequoia and some of our other VCs had already reached out to us and said, guys, start planning for what if this is really, the worst economic and healthcare crisis that you have ever seen, or that we've ever seen. And it actually helped because, many of the founders got together, the teams got together and started planning for really what happens to us, our teams, our merchant bases, our cash flow, our customers. And, we started planning the scenarios already in February because we received that advice from our investors, and I think it sort of held us in very good stead. I always call myself a pathological optimist. So I was always hoping that the worst scenario doesn't come to be, but in terms of, where we stand with the pandemic today and how much it has disrupted global supply chains and financing, it's just, it's good that we had that advice around the table. So I'm very grateful and thankful for it.
Pathological optimist. That's a great way to phrase it. And I think, Lizzie, you closed your round towards the end of last year, and that was, very good timing. What is the type of advice you've been receiving from your investors? Because clearly that would be somewhat different than others.
Yeah, no, it was good timing. Touch wood. I think we got similar advice to Ankiti actually, which was, prepare for the worst, and then if things turn out, you can relax. So we took a lot of quite drastic, cost-cutting measures and things like that very early on. But I was going to say the better advice actually came from other founders and operators who maybe were slightly further ahead than we were in terms of the impact on their business. So maybe people in the travel space who almost immediately had a much tougher time than any of us. So I think I've spent more time over the last few weeks really connecting with other founders, and that's been one of the most helpful, not just advice, but also sort of psychological support.
Louis, is that the same for you? Have you turned to other founders for advice? Who told you to get acquired? Did you listen to anyone there, or was that your own decision?
I mean, that's for sure. Actually, because we provide the payment to different kind of industry. So during the first week of February, when the airport in Singapore is kind of partially closed, many airlines were canceled. We can feel from the number of transactions from day one, actually. And we are informed that, especially we provide the payment to many duty-free shops in Changi. Then we realize that daily sales has got some problem. It triggered our transaction monitoring system, right? Because of the daily transactions and number of transactions are far more less than it usually was, especially it's during the Chinese New Year festival season. Then we quickly start to talk to the customer and merchants, especially those duty-free shops or travel industry customers. Then that's how we are able to get a feeling actually much earlier than most of the other business in the industry, because we deal with money, we deal with payment. Actually, if you just look at how the money flow, you can feel how big impact this pandemic has triggered and when it triggered. Actually, when we look at the diagraph we have drawn in the past few months, it matched perfectly with what economics talk about the market economy, right? During the circuit breaker period, most of the retailers or the F&Bs have to close their shops. So the offline payment have drawn, significantly, very bad results during that 1 or 2 months time. But then the online payment have grown exponentially. We start to receive numerous inquiries since late February, a few times more than the normal times. And then when the phase 2 starts, then you realize the offline shops start to reopen, then the business start to come back, right? But slowly. So all this you are able to tell from the daily transactions, and we are quite confident. The economy is recovering well. That's how we can draw the insight from our current transaction data. Yeah.
Well, hopefully we'll start to see some more green shoots over the coming months. But for the last part of this session, let's look to the future. And in particular, Ankiti, you've had great success in recent years in the B2B space, disrupting the supply chain. And so while the environment clearly has been quite challenging this year, can you share more about how you're looking to refocus your business and what this means for the longer term?
The most important thing, Pat, that the crisis has done is that it has forced digitization upon a lot of industries. And especially when we talk about B2B commerce and supply chain, it would have taken perhaps 5 to 10 years to achieve the kind of digitization that's now going to happen in the next 2 to 3 years. So imagine a world where traders would trade with agents and other merchants and suppliers with old school invoicing, old school payment methods, with physical sampling, and all of that got dismantled at once because physical contact was impossible, and the entire process had just suddenly broken. So there was a forced digitization as far as I think global supply chains are concerned, not just in our industry or our categories. And I think what it means for the future is that actually a lot of inefficiencies can go away, a lot of efficiency and a lot of value can be unlocked. I don't think there has ever been a crisis which is not tremendously positively impacted the adoption of technology in history. And therefore, as we get out of this pandemic and sort of the damage that it leaves us in, there will be no option but to adopt technology as far as payments, logistics, supply chain, and discovery of products and cross-border trade is concerned. So in general, I think, it's 5 to 10 years of digitization that's going to happen all at once in the next 2 to 3 years. So it could actually leave us all in a much more efficient and value-creating space once this is all over.
Sharing, Ankiti. And Lizzie, what does the future look like for you? I saw last week the announcement of the partnership with Google. Google are clearly making big strides in India at the moment. So what does your partnership strategy look like for this year?
Yeah, no, I think very similar to Ankiti. We feel that the pandemic has done work that would have taken 5 years in about 5 months. It's much, much easier now to do these kinds of partnerships because the entire ecosystem has woken up to the need for digital financing options. Signing up for physical credit cards isn't going to happen for a while, and that creates a plethora of new partners. The other exciting thing for us is we've been inundated with partners from across the region. So companies in countries like Vietnam, Philippines are now looking for pay later products, and that's been really, really fast and accelerating. So it's a really exciting time from a partnership perspective.
Moving on to you, Louis. What does the future look like for you now? Because it feels like it's going to be a different world, a different ball game, now that you're part of the AMTD group family.
Right. I would say when we started back in 2015, during that time, there are a lot of fintech startups, who were established during that time. The market very optimistic, right? Everybody talks about unbundle the traditional banking service. So there are many areas, maybe traditional banks who didn't do well. That's where a lot of, young startups who find opportunities to provide better service or who provide better particular service, only focus on one, area. It can be payment, it can be lending, it can be robo-advisory, or even insurance. But after 5 years, now it comes to the kind of challenging time. We do see the market, the sentiment has changed, and the customers are looking for integrated solutions. They expect one-stop solutions instead of, I come to you for payment, I come to another one for lending. Actually, every day there are our merchants who ask, hey, Louis, whether your company could provide the loans to us because we face a short-term, cash flow problem, even though we are just a payment providers. So what we see the future, especially in the next 1 to 2 years time, due to the market changes, right? We do see the big tech players are coming in, a lot of strong consultants, big platforms are forming up, right? If you just focus by providing one particular service, it's going to be challenging. More partnership collaborations need to form up, and more excitingly is traditional. Financial institutions are getting more and more open-minded and are investing more on the new digital solutions. So it's a time to look at kind of ecosystem of platform banking instead of, compared to when we started, we only focus on payment, which we have been only focused on this in the past 5 years. That's also the reason why we choose to join AMTD ecosystem, whereas to be able to offer the full value chain kind of financial products to the existing customer or the prospects instead of just focusing on the payment itself. So, and we are also very excited to say that the regulator are getting more and more open right now. There will be digital banking license who are going to issue soon, right? And also is talking also regulators are talking about the CBDC, central bank distribute the digital currency. All this kind of new change from the regulator perspective, from the traditional financial institution perspective, are going to bring the new opportunities to the fintech industry. So that's why we are very optimistic about the upcoming future.
Sticking with the theme of optimism, I'd like to ask each of you your green shoot story. So this is something that Pat and I have kind of made a signature. We're doing these sessions over the pandemic. Just one positive news story that's impacted you over the last 6 months. Ideally something from financial services or something that's impacted your day-to-day running of your business. And just a quick fire round to finish up. So I'm going to start with you, Ankiti. Please do share your green shoot story with us.
No, so our green shoot story has been that before the pandemic, almost all of our business was run by fashion merchants and textile merchants, and obviously that industry saw a huge drop as the pandemic took over. And as of today, over 70% of our merchants have actually come back to digital sourcing. Many of them have actually gone beyond just pure fashion and textile and found interesting new niches and categories like PPE, gloves, masks. They're making perfume, sanitizers, selling personal care products on different platforms to customers at home. So I think that's really encouraging that, it's the spirit of entrepreneurship amongst all of our merchants, which is still well and alive. And hopefully it's going to take us all out of this pandemic with flying colors.
For what inspired me the most during this period is actually in the past few years we have always been promoting the digital payment as a gateway solution provider. But the problem is my family, they don't quite get, especially the elder generation, they don't quite get what's the digital payment. When I explain to them, right, you are able to bring your phones.
I bet now they do.
Yeah, correct. So they always ask, why not cash, right? Everywhere accept cash, and I can bring my bags, my wallets. I don't have to. It's not necessary to use this mobile payment. It's just good to have. But then one day, actually in April, so my family, they send me a text. They say, hey, I went to shop around in a restaurant. They tell me you have to use the QR, the pay now QR to make the payment because you don't want to touch the cash. The cashiers, the owner say, okay, I only accept the pay now QR for now, because they say there will be some hygiene issues for the cash in that period of time. Then my family, it's the first time they use their phone and the bank apps to scan and make that QR payment. And they send the text to me. They say, oh, it's really convenient, right? So that's sometimes you have this kind of feeling that, when you talk about the new technology, people may not realize until they really try it, until they really see the convenience and the benefit when it brings to the real life. And later, I received more such kind of message in the past 2 or 3 months when my friends text me. They say, oh, I saw your QR payment out there. I try it. It works well. I don't need to use cash. If you feel like the people, the mass market are really going through a kind of fast, swift adoption of this kind of pay now QR, SGQR, whereas you are able to see more and more wet market hawker centers. They are also start to put those kind of QR payment over there. And when we talk to the merchant, especially the SME, some tells us, it's the first cashless payment they have received in the past, 20 to 30 years. They never accept other cashless payment. They always use cash. So those are the times you feel that, sense of achievement, what you are doing is really changing, kind of how this business works. And that's my green shoot story.
And finally, your family understands what you do.
Yeah, they do understand now.
And appreciate it.
Yeah, but now, there's a new functions upcoming. It's called the request to pay, right? I believe if they are going to try it out, then they'll ask me to pay for them next time when they scan those QR and make the cashless payment outside.
Good for them, but maybe not good for you.
I would rather to pay for that, for them to try this kind of new technology, and really hope that one day we are able to just bring the phone and no need to bring the wallet, and you can go anywhere in Singapore or even in the region. That's our vision.
Nice. Thanks, Louis. And Lizzie, take us away with your green shoot story.
Sure. So I think the hardest bit of our life for many fintechs is working with banks. And we spend hours and hours trying to evangelize why they should work on a completely digital model. One of the best things that happened recently was we got on the line with a multinational bank, and they started the call by saying, we've decided to move to 100% digital origination. So I think that's just a sign of things to come, and very exciting for the fintech community.
And a special thanks to Mike Wells again for dialing in from the US at an ungodly hour. So the last thing I kind of want to say is stay safe and keep pushing the boundaries of innovation forward. Thank you.
See you in December.
Thanks.